Now, you all know that there was peace and quiet in the South before the NAACP started stirring up trouble. But what you don't know is that this so-called advancement of colored people is now, and has always been, nothing but a communist front, headed by a Jew who hates America and doesn't make any bones about it either. Well, the commies didn't waste a second. They knew, only too well, friends, that the quickest way to cripple a country is to mongrelize it. So they poured all the millions of dollars the Jews could get for them into this one thing, desegregation. They went to the courts. Now, Judge Silver, who is a Jew and is known to have leftist leanings.
Who says so?
The record says so. Look it up. Abraham Silver, for one thing, belongs to the Quill and Pen Society, which receives its funds indirectly from Moscow. So what did the judge do? Went right ahead and ordered integration for the Caxton High School. Your mayor and the governor could have stopped it, but they didn't have the guts.
That's right.
All right. Now, you may think the problem is simply whether we're going to allow 10 Negroes to go to our schools. That's only a small part of it. I'm in a position to know, because the Patrick Henry Society has studied the whole thing. The real problem, whether you like it or not, is whether you're going to sit back and let desegregation spread throughout the entire South. And it's an indisputable fact that there could be no other result. The Negroes will literally, and I do mean literally, control the South. The vote will be theirs. You'll have black mayors and black policemen the way they do in Chicago and New York already. Like there's not a black governor and black doctors to deliver your babies. If they find time, that is. And that's the way it'll be. Did you ever stop to think about that? When you let those 10 enter your school, did you? Now let me ask you, do you people want niggers taking over? No! And are you willing to fight this thing down to the last ditch and keep fighting until it's over? Then I'm willing to fight with you.
Why, Mr. Kramer?
Why? Because I'm an American, sir, and I love my country. And I'm willing to give my life, if that be necessary, to see that my country stays free, white, and American!
The following film podcast frequently contains adult content, including foul language and descriptions of adult situations. Spoilers for the films discussed occur often. Listener discretion is advised. Now take it away, Dr. Rausch.
They must be destroyed on sight.
All right, welcome to They Must Be Destroyed on Sight, episode 156. I'm your host, Lee. No matter how much you hate me, blame me, and want to shoot me, it wasn't my fault, Russell. And I'm joined by my co-host, Daniel. Doctors got a name for it, but they can't cure it. Harper. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you. And I do have that affliction, unfortunately. There's only one treatment for it, ultimately.
You have to become a white supremacist.
Yeah, well, I was going to say cunnilingus, but,
I thought the thing the doctors had the name for, I was paying you a compliment here, actually, that you're a charming individual with good morals.
Right. Yes.
But I mean, if you want to...
I was going more on the, clearly, the condition she has is nymphomania, and the only cure for that is maybe she just needs better sex rather than more. But that's not actually how nymphomania works. It was a stupid joke. We have officially beaten it into the ground. It's fine.
We're finishing off our little look at both blaxploitation and pseudo or proto blaxploitation films. We're going to be looking at Roger Corman's The Intruder from 1962. But before we get into that, we do have quite a bit of feedback to get to, so I'm going to jump right into it. Apologies if I pronounce your name incorrectly. Perhaps Daniel knows this person and can correct me, because they say Daru McAilsey says, I got into They Must Be Destroyed on Sight listening to Daniel on Oi Spaceman.
I'm not sure I know the person, but if I am supposed to know them, then I apologize. But yeah.
It's like McAilsey or McAileese or something like that. Just let me know if I fucked up your name. I apologize. You know how I am of pronouncing things. I'm terrible. Anyway, he says, really digging the podcast as I'm a movie freak, especially an odd movie lover. Just going through the back catalog and just loving it. Cheers, guys. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Yeah, and he had another comment on our Hard Bodies episode where he was... at first, I thought I had blown his eardrums out because the sound levels were probably bad on that edit. But now he's just surprised that we threw a bunch of 80s music into the soundtrack. So, yeah. Yep. Mike Murphy, brand new podcaster, Mike Murphy of the Exploitation Film Podcast.
Yeah. I bet that's a show that goes places.
Yeah. He said he had fun listening to your Truck Turner episode, guys, regarding the feedback read out prior to the film discussion. Whoever compared They Must Be Destroyed on Sight to the projection booth was clearly drunk. They Must Be Destroyed on Sight is far better. Well, thank you very much. I don't know why Mike is trying to suck up to us. Maybe
he wants us to promote the Exploitation Filmcast and get our massive audience over onto his new project. That's probably what it is. I'm sure it's completely cynical.
But thank you.
Mike. I know what happened. I mentioned the Zodiac again, and suddenly Mike Murphy just shows up.
Yeah, that must be it. He's talking about my daddy. And we will actually get a fucking promo for your show, Mike, so we can play it. But I will link your new podcast in the show notes so people can check it out. They probably already clearly heard about it, but just in case there's one or two who think BB and BC is dead and you're not doing anything else. Our friend Gary Hill, a fellow podcaster from Cinema Beef, in regards to The Intruder, says, great film, deserves a good release. Agreed. We'll get into the releases, of course, later on, but we have Jeff Williams chiming in saying, recommendation of the week, Play It As It Lays. A very dark, unflinching, and unmelodramatic look at the private life of a woman in the filmmaking business. Tuesday Weld and Anthony Perkins star in this Frank Perry film as an indie actress and her gay producer friend who have been chewed up and shat out by their unfulfilling lives. Didn't think Perry could get bleaker than The Swimmer, but he does with this. For more Weld and Perkins, also check out the offbeat Pretty Poison. That sounds good.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely have to look into that. Thank you very much, Jeff. And then finally, Cameron Sullivan comes in, and he says, Corman often remarks how he later snuck in his social commentary into far more marketable exploitation films. Would love to hear your guys' take on his recurring themes. And then he says, also maybe discuss Shatner's other unusual roles like White Comanche and Denny Crane, etc. From Denny Crane, that's Boston Legal, or
that's the
isn't it that lawyer show that also had Jerry Ryan on it?
Yeah, or that show ran forever. I don't know, like 90s television. Sorry, I didn't realize I was gonna have to dig into the memory banks on that one. But.
No, you threw us for a curveball there, Cameron.
David Kelly, I think, was the producer I was trying to name there. Anyway,
as far as Corman's sort of throwing social commentary into his films, now I'm at a loss to give like a lot of specific examples here, but for the most part, Corman has always been upfront about the fact that he would often just do the thing of think of a title and then build a film around it. Get a title and get a poster and then build a film around it and spend as little money as possible making that film and just make shit tons of money. And that formula actually worked for him, except for The Intruder, which we'll get into as well later on. He would often say that he'd be more interested in trying to make a workable story around the concept of the title. And then if he saw some angle he could throw in there with some social commentary, he would. But it's not necessarily something that was primarily on his mind in most of his films. In fact, I think The Intruder might be the only sort of exception to the rule there for his stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it is like the stuff that's kind of going on in the culture around that time. I mean, this is a hugely tumultuous period. Clearly, he's a filmmaker, and I've talked about this, a number of times over the course of, the 85 years we've been doing this podcast. But when you're not using a lot of money. And, as long as you kind of deliver the thing that, the schlocky, the special effects or the gore or whatever, you can kind of get away with a lot of stuff. And I suspect that there's some buried stuff that just kind of bubbles out from this consciousness. Because clearly you watch this and you kind of see some of the other stuff he's produced, even the stuff we've already covered. And there's clearly like some ideas, kind of buried underneath it, but it's not, it feels less sort of Gene Roddenberry, like sort of like, oh, we're going to make that like stuff with like a social conscience as much as it's you're just going to tell the story and it's going to have like kind of cool women in it, or it's going to like kind of be about teenage angst, or it's going to be about because it's just sort of like a thing that's just kind of happening. It's just kind of sometimes that comes about from the kind of like quickness of script writing and filmmaking too, is that you don't really have time to like sort of edit all that shit out of it. You just sort of get it out there and then suddenly it was just there, so that's kind of my very broad take. I mean, I would like to do some more Roger Corman stuff, and kind of examine that a little bit more closely, because looking at his filmography, there were a few that looked like, oh, that might actually be really interesting that I haven't seen. So, well,
man, he directed 50 odd films on his own, right, and he's produced over 400 films.
Right.
So there's a lot of stuff there. It's like, it's kind of hard to narrow down specific examples of where maybe he was really going for something.
Right.
But yeah, for the most part, and I think he'll fully admit this, that unless he's trying to, pump up his own image, which he's definitely done many times over, for the most part, it's kind of like a secondary or even tertiary kind of concern of his is, if we can throw some social commentary in there, then we'll do it. I mean, he's usually just interested in what's trendy at the moment. When they were making Rock and Roll High School, he initially wanted it to be like a disco theme thing. But at that point, disco was pretty much dead. And so then it ended up being a movie centered around the Ramones. Yeah, I think he directed the latest remake of Death Race that came out like a couple years ago. And there are some like little comments here on mass media and corporate culture, and even like a couple shots at Donald Trump, but they're pretty weak sauce, and for the most part, they're not really far removed from what he was doing in the original Death Race 2000. So
yeah, I mean, it's a lot of times they just kind of throw in a couple of like broad comments or whatever, and it's just kind of gloss on just whatever.
As for Shatner's unusual roles, Jesus Christ, he's done so many
really long career. I mean, he's been acting for like 50 years at this point.
I have seen White Comanche, and we need to do that with Burt Reynolds' Navajo Joe as a double,
because Paul Newman's Hombre. Because I put that one on for 15 minutes. So no, I'm not ready for this one.
So with Navajo Joe, they tan up Burt Reynolds and put some like brown face on him or whatever to try to make him look like an Indian, right? They don't do any of that with William Shatner in White Comanche. In White Comanche, he plays a set of twins who are like half Comanche, half white, and one of them's this vicious, raping Comanche Indian war chief, and the other's this cowboy, and they come in conflict with each other. And Shatner doesn't Indian himself up at all, playing the Indian side of this thing.
I think it sounds like what he should have done is just gone straight Italian. Just, because playing it with an Italian accent would make it more accurate to the depiction of Native Americans in films of that era.
Well, I mean, it was an Italian Western, and
he should just like have a plate of spaghetti at all times, to being like, "That's a spicy meatball. I'm a Native American."
Like, if you could find the Italian dub of that would be pretty funny, I think. But actually, I'm determined now. We're going to do White Comanche and Navajo
Sure.
Joe, just because that'll probably be one of the most racist episodes we ever do.
We've done some racist episodes, you know.
Well, yeah, White Comanche's pretty horrific. I seem to recall like the couple episodes of the lawyer show he was on that Denny Crane was like a silly, awful human being who was suffering from Alzheimer's or something.
He was kind of like all of those shows from that era were kind of, all those David Kelly shows were kind of quirky workplace comedies. And it was like, Boston Legal or whatever. And it was like, we're lawyers and we take on quirky cases. And, it was kind of, I don't know. I was, I never quite followed it. I think he came on like after a couple of years too.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. So, Shatner said, he's had a really long career of just kind of doing a lot of like really shitty TV, but also kind of doing like some pretty good work. He was in like Third Rock from the Sun, and he played like the big commander or whatever on that. And he's just kind of been a guy who's just been on TV forever.
He's a complicated guy because he's a guy who openly rejected Star Trek nerdism early on, and then eventually kind of went with the tide. Whether he truly embraces it or just realizes, hey, this is where my money is now, that's up to debate, I guess. But he's never been afraid of making fun of himself by the looks of things. Like, he kind of realizes what a goof he is. Right. Like one of my favorite guest roles I've ever seen Shatner in, and this is my favorite episode of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. This is the one he showed up in playing himself, where they were in a dentist office and they got under the influence of the laughing gas, and where everything was all of a sudden funny to everybody in the room because they were all exposed to the gas, and it's still one of the funniest moments I've seen on a TV sitcom. And
that's awesome.
It is really good.
I haven't seen that. No. If we're going to do Shatner, let's do Tech War.
Tech War.
That was a series of made-for-TV movies that I kind of loved as a teenager when I saw them, like on USA or whatever.
Did that not come out like around the same time where every other cheaply produced sci-fi property had a TV series? That was like around the same time that Alien Nation had their TV movies. Yeah,
it was all like, and that was when I was like 13, 14, and so I watched like a ton of that crap, and I have fond memories of them, honestly. So a bunch of them are on YouTube, or at least like a couple of them are on YouTube. So I was kind of like, this might be kind of a fun thing for us to do at some point. I
would not be opposed to delving into Tech War and see, because I know he wrote the books, right?
He wrote the books, and apparently the books are kind of goofy fun if you're just sort of into that sort of sci-fi bullshit,
Didn't he write a bunch of non-canonical Star Trek books as well?
I think he wrote, one of these like alternate universe things or whatever. Like, he's written a ton of stuff. Like, I mean, he stays busy. He's kind of a racist, sexist dickhead, but like he's not an untalented guy. And unfortunately, I think he kind of, spoiler alert, I think he might have peaked in 1962. But we can,
yeah, but. There we go. Thank you guys for the comments. Keep them coming. We like having a big comment section.
Yeah.
You keep sending us enough comments, we're going to put it behind the paywall, and then you'll have to pay for the Patreon.
We'll do a letter segment at the end after we do. That way, our fans on YouTube won't have to, post, like time codes at the bottom.
Right. So, anything you watched in the last little while, Daniel?
Yeah, I did. Knowing we had Corman coming up, I threw up a Bucket of Blood, which I hadn't seen in a long time.
Dick Miller?
My wife really likes that. It's like an hour long, and it's like completely justifies its length. It's a really fun little movie. I really enjoy it. I love Dick Miller's performance. I love the way that the art world is portrayed in this kind of hippie, kind of beatnik culture.
Yeah,
it's art culture. And they don't really like him, and then suddenly it's like, oh, so realistic. Your
so lifelike,
are so amazing, so lifelike. And it's why is there a knife in the side of the cat? Well, it just is. I really enjoy that film. I think it's a lot of fun. Again, it's an hour long. If you haven't seen it, you should definitely check it out. It's all over the place. I'm sure it's on YouTube. I caught it on Amazon Prime. It was a pretty good print. So
it's good, and the remake is even pretty good. Which has what's his name from Weird Science and all those other
Anthony Michael Hall.
Anthony Michael Hall, yeah.
Awesome. I haven't seen that version.
It was from the 90s remake.
Well, it's got Anthony Michael Hall in it. You know, that's
because Corman, he had a lot of his properties remade over and over again, like 2 or 3 times. Some of them. Humanoids from the Deep has 2 or 3 remakes. Piranha has several remakes, you know. So
fun times.
One thing I'll just mention that I rewatched, Kong Skull Island. I rewatched it last night. Liked it even more than the first time I watched it. That movie's a lot of fun. It actually is.
You said that. I haven't watched it yet. I'm gonna have to check it out. I feel like I'm so burnt by the Peter Jackson King Kong, which I didn't even hate that, but it was just kind of like, why?
This is kind of what you were hoping the Peter Jackson King Kong might be, because it's just much more fun. It's an adventure film. Yeah. You know, and it's all Skull Island. It's not Beauty and the Beast and that sort of tired, played out shit. It's just fucking King Kong fucking up monsters and shit. Like,
nice,
good stuff. And John C. Reilly, he's awesome in that film. He just steals the whole fucking film.
I feel really bad that John C. Reilly has sort of become the comedy guy that he has. Like, he became Will Ferrell's buddy. Not that, he does it fine, but he's a really phenomenal actor. And I mean, particularly if you look at, the early work he did with P.T. Anderson and how phenomenal he is in that. And I think he just kind of transitioned into, kind of being the cartoon character. And it's a shame that we haven't gotten more really nice subtle performances out of him, because he's really, really good. So
and this is good too, because it sort of skirts that. There's the subtle dramatic performance, and then there's the funny part too, because he's basically just this guy who's been stranded on Skull Island for 25 years or something like that.
Nice.
His plane crashes during World War II on Skull Island. And then when the current team of people come to Skull Island to do a exploration of it or whatever, they run into him. He's like, holy shit, people. And I'd really like to, he's asking about baseball scores and stuff like that. And he runs into the soldiers who show up and is, you're a good bunch of guys, good bunch of boys to be with. We're all going to die on this island.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really good stuff. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll play some music and some podcast promos, and we're going to come back with The Intruder.
Broadcasting from the cursed earth, the Psychosemantic Podcast.
Let us face, without panic, the reality of our time. The fact that atom bombs may someday be dropped on our cities. And let us prepare for survival by understanding the weapon that threatens us.
To have an ignorant, thin-skinned megalomaniac who sends off Twitters at 3 a.m. if somebody angered him.
Neo-Nazis turning up in Washington, D.C. to have a rally saying Heil Trump.
We talk about politics.
I knew I couldn't trust you corporate greaseballs.
We talk about movies.
You can't come down here and arrest people just because of what they look like. Are you crazy? But that's police harassment.
We talk about political movies.
We're in trouble. The whole world's in trouble. They're all around us and we never knew it. You can only see them with these special glasses.
The Psychosemantic Cast.
All right, The Intruder from 1962.
This man, take a good look at him. He's a specialist. He knows exactly how to turn this quiet town into a hell of violence.
The Negroes will literally, and I do mean literally, control the South. Are you willing to fight down to the last ditch and keep fighting till this thing is over?
made the sleepy town of Caxton his town for his reason. He played on their fears and their hatreds. This town became a headline for the Intruder. He brought an end to innocence. He exploited a woman's weakness. He turned neighbor against neighbor.
How come you walk that bunch of black niggers to our white school? I don't see anything I do is any business of yours.
And sooner or later it would happen. He would make it happen.
Over here.
You were alone with a white girl in the basement of the school, but you didn't try to do anything. Is that what you expect us to believe, nigger? Well, speak up!
AKA I Hate Your Guts, Shame, and The Stranger. It is directed by Roger Corman, written by the great Charles Beaumont, who is a prolific short story writer of horror and sci-fi, did a lot of screenplays for movies, did a lot of classic Twilight Zone episodes as well.
He also wrote the novel on which this is based,
yes.
And I am definitely going to read that. Like, I put that on my to-read list, definitely.
He was one of those really rare, talented guys who unfortunately died very young. It was right after this movie, actually, like a year later or so, that symptoms of some sort of dementia started to come on. And he might have also had a couple other diseases that came on that degenerated him and aged him like drastically to the point where he died at age 38. Like sucks. But he was one of these guys who was really like idolized and respected by his contemporaries, Ray Bradbury and several of the writers that actually appear in this,
including Beaumont. Beaumont appears in it, yeah.
William Shatner stars as Adam Kramer. Frank Maxwell as Tom McDaniel. Beverly Lunsford as Ella McDaniel. Robert Earhart as Vern Shipman. Leo Gordon as Sam Griffin. And Leo Gordon was in a movie we have covered before, Kitten with a Whip.
Oh, nice.
Charles Barnes as Joey Green. Charles Beaumont as Mr. Patton. And you can see him there. Like
pivotal role, yeah.
Yeah, and you can see how kind of old he looks there.
Yeah.
He's only like 31
or something.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Catherine Smith is Ruth McDaniel. Writer George Clayton Johnson is Phil West. He did a lot of Twilight Zone. He wrote Logan's Run with the other writer in this, William F. Nolan. And he also wrote the novel adaptation of Ocean's 11.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. William F. Nolan as Bart Carey, of course, did Logan's Run. He did the screenplay for Burnt Offerings. He also did a treatment on Who Goes There that was not picked up and used for the eventual The Thing.
No.
But he did do a treatment on it. And Janine Cooper as Vi Griffin and Phoebe Rowe as Miss Lambert. And we have a synopsis here from IMDB. A man in a gleaming white suit comes to a small southern town on the eve of integration. His name is Adam Kramer. He calls himself a social reformer, but his aim is to incite the people against letting black children into the town's white school. Soon he has the white citizens of the town worked up. He thinks he's leading them, but a man he befriends and immediately betrays knows better. The people have become a mob. The black leader of a church and a white newspaper editor soon feel its wrath. But after a false accusation against a black student, Adam Kramer may find the people are totally and permanently out of his control. From Jay Sperlin. And I think we've read Jay Sperlin's synopses before on this thing. But
that's not bad. That's
not bad.
Solid, yeah.
So this is the first time you watched this, Dan, and what's your general thoughts?
I had put this on like a year ago or so, just kind of idly. It showed up and it was on Amazon Prime or whatever, and I was like, oh, that looks interesting, So this is not my first time watching it, although I think I kind of forgot about it when we did our best of the year list that year because this would absolutely belong on that kind of list.
Same here.
So I actually bought a DVD of this week just so I can own it. I was like, okay, fine. This is an amazing film. I mean, this is one of the best films. I mean, I've been following, sort of institutional racism and white nationalists for a while now. This is one of the best films about this topic that exists. I like Black Klansman, the Spike Lee film, and this is so much better than that. And it was made in 1962. This has the Klan bombing a church before the 16th Street church bombing, 4 years before that actual event. This is pre Civil Rights Act. This is made right at the height of it, and it's almost photo real because it's actually shot in a place where this stuff was actually happening. A bunch of the people listening to these segregationist speeches were actual people who supported segregation. Who thought that Adam Kramer is the hero of the film. There's a lot of really amazing stuff in this, and it also just works as a film. I think it's really got a pretty intricate plot. It's got some really interesting characters. It's got some really nice things to say. I think all the performances are amazing. In fact, a lot of these actors are non-professional actors. They're just townspeople. And yet, in particular, Charles Barnes is Joey Green, just basically a kid in this town. And he is amazing in this. And again, small role, but it's pivotal. And it's, if his performance doesn't work, then the movie itself doesn't work. It's just, I don't know. It's hard to, I'm trying to kind of skip over it without kind of going into too much detail, but I fucking love this film. I think it's amazing.
Nice. Same here. This is basically a first-time watch for me. I've known what this film was about forever, and I've definitely seen bits and pieces of it here and there. But I'm going to count this as a first-time watch this year. So.
Yeah, I think we're both going to do that this time. So
Yeah. So this is on the best of list already. I mean, you go into it expecting, okay, it's going to be a Roger Corman cheapie, and it's not going to look that great, and it's going to be full of hammy performances, but it's not that at all. It's the opposite of that. It's shot well, despite there's a lot of shitty copies of it out there. It still looks pretty good even in that form. It's got that very stark, noirish, black and white kind of thing going on.
Well, it's almost that sort of Italian neorealist black and white, sort of idea, because it looks like it looks shot 16 millimeter. I don't think it's shot 35, and so it has this slightly grainier, kind of more documentary feel to it.
Yes.
It feels a little bit more like a Battle of Algiers or something, kind of the way that's shot. It's got a similar kind of look and feel to that. Which, in this case, it's just because Corman didn't have the money for real film. It is, necessity by the invention and all that, but,
Yeah. Again, we run into another movie that sells the weather perfectly. It sells the heat of this town.
Yep.
It captures as much as a lot of Southerners today would probably try to protest this, and they definitely did back in the day. I think it perfectly captures the small town mentality for the most part.
Yeah.
It just happens to capture a small town mentality that's deeply embedded by racism through generations.
Yeah.
Also shows
this could be the town where I grew up, honestly. I grew up in the deep South. I grew up, 20, 30 years later was kind of when I was growing up there, and I grew up in a little bit more of a suburban town as opposed to sort of this kind of environment. But a lot of this looks like people I could have known as a kid, no question in my mind.
And this one even does a lot of the same things that say Tick 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 does, where it looks at both sides of the town. You see the white community, you see the black community, you see some of the black community is resistant to this change as well. They don't necessarily want integration. The old grandfather character who's sitting on the porch tells the kids who are going to the school, "You Negroes going to cause some of us niggers to get killed." And he makes a distinction between those two words, Negroes and niggers, right?
Yeah.
I love.
It's kind of hard to talk about this film without
this movie says more racial epithets than most blaxploitation films do.
Yeah,
it throws it out there. The first 5 minutes, there's an old lady saying, "I don't like those niggers coming to our school," or whatever. Right? It throws it right in your face. It's not,
and it's very much when you hear it, it's very much this is that's what she would have said. That's the character. That's it doesn't feel. It's shocking, but it's shocking in the way that it's just oh yeah, of course.
And then
we can't let them in here,
And in 1962, it definitely, I don't think it would be as shocking as it is now. I mean, now the word is so taboo in so many different sectors of society. Back then, some white person saying that word wouldn't necessarily be all that shocking.
Well, even, I mean, we watched 70s crime film. One of your favorites. What's the...
Friends of Eddie Coyle?
Friends of Eddie Coyle, and that's got like a bunch of that kind of... a lot of the harsher language in that, which is sort of made to make the kind of the bad guys look like, it's just meant to sort of color to make them kind of look a little more sinister, or a little
also
rough around the edges.
Well,
but also sort of working class and that kind of stuff.
They're working class gangsters, and that's kind of like in their own little fraternity. They have no problem saying that shit all the time.
Right, exactly. Yeah, no, I'm not trying. I mean, I'm just saying, like, even 10, 12 years later, you're still kind of using it, and it's kind of used in a slightly different way. Here, it's just, I mean, it's just part of the texture of the world that if this is shot in like southeast Missouri. I mean, this is not a foreign word to the actors who are appearing in this film, like at all, And it is just I feel like that's part of the power of the film, is that it sells it as just sort of part of a lived reality. It isn't trying to necessarily rub the audience's nose in it. It's just, well, yeah, of course, that's just. The
70-year-old woman's dropping the N-bomb in the first 5 minutes of the movie, and she's your charming old grandmother character at the same time. It's like she's so likable, and then she says that. It's like, oh, Grandma, why'd you say that?
When you got to go there, And then later on, you get the other old guy. I guess he's
the stepfather.
He's the stepfather,
father-in-law. I think
father-in-law. Yeah. So. And he's, sorry, spoiler alert. I mean, eventually, he kind of comes out and is like, hey, if that boy had tried that, when 20 years ago, he would have gotten the noose, and I would have been the one pulling the rope, and it becomes like this just isn't the way we do things here,
that's an interesting character too. He's just a small character, but he's the father-in-law of the newspaper guy.
Yeah.
Who becomes one of our heroes in the film, and he is genuinely insulted by the idea that you're going to make me look bad in front of my friends if they find out that you're one of those in lovers,
If they find out that you're like promoting race mixing, you're going to make me look bad in front of my buddies, and he's so
generally.
That's so much of the way this gets enforced in real life. It's not. It's not like you don't have to. You can believe what you believe, but like we got to have standards here.
Yeah.
And this isn't just like sort of this overtly racist, like small town hick Southerners, which I think the film mostly avoids that stereotype. I think
there's only honestly I think the one character that really. There's two characters that really portray that, and that's two of the writers doing the sort of their only roles, and that would be William F. Nolan and George Clayton Johnson, because George Clayton he's the one who's the wiry guy who's getting in everybody's face,
right?
And William F. Nolan is the guy with the glasses and the hat, who's like the leader of the people, like the local group. He's not the politician; he's the sort of local guy who's at the different rallies and stuff.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, even with them,
it's not sort of pushed into like the corn pone, sort of idea. It's not like the guy from Black Klansman, which again I like Black Klansman, but it definitely kind of gives us the like super dumb redneck, racist character that we're supposed to laugh at. This doesn't have that. All of our virulent, awful racists are also people that we would otherwise like in our life, and you
and I have both grown up with these people, and we both come from small town backgrounds, and that's just the way it is. It's just sort of beaten into them through a form of social engineering. Basically, they're just raised. Well, we can't have them coloreds mixing with our white kids, that's terrible. Our newspaper man's wife, she's racist, and she's racist because of that kind of thing. She's not necessarily a bad person. She's just been institutionalized racism her whole life, and she doesn't even know why she doesn't like it.
Right.
Like, she's just racist. She doesn't even know why.
She's just racist, and she's like, and when our newspaper man, starts, because he is not, I really like his arc, right? Because he begins the film not in favor of integration, but he's sort of like, well, this is the law, and this is, and we have to obey the law because this is what we do. We get along to get along,
Yeah.
His wife is kind of like resistant to it, but is sort of, like just gonna kind of support him or whatever. And then as the film goes on, I mean, as he kind of sees this like kind of evil unfolding, and he sees kind of what Adam Kramer, what Shatner's doing, he realizes that you kind of have to make a decision to be on one side or the other. He makes the right decision, and he pays a terrible price for it.
Yeah, he loses an eye.
He loses an eye. I mean, he gets beaten, and I mean, he kind of leaves the film at a certain point, and it's terrible. And even at that, his wife is like, "I don't know why you do this, but you're a good man, and if you believe in this as strongly, I guess it's the right thing to do."
Yeah.
Like that's the most he ever gets out of her, which again is a very nuanced and realistic portrait of the way that like people kind of come along with this like kicking and screaming sometimes, but I love that he gets that his hero moment is just, I'm gonna walk alongside you guys and help you to make sure you get there safely, and then immediately he pays the terrible price for it. It's heartbreaking because like it would be easy for the film to make him the big hero, that like he gets the big hero moment at the end, but no, it ends up being a lot more interesting than that, a lot more kind of complicated than that, and that this isn't a film with kind of one hero who saves the day and kind of one villain who gets his comeuppance. I mean, there is a little bit of, the villain gets his comeuppance, but it's still, not total. It's not complete. I mean, he can move on to the next town and try it again, or whatever, but it's all based on these kind of like fairly intricate kind of readings of these characters and the way that these just people work. And I mean, again, I want to read the novel and see like how much of this was there in the novel and to kind of see what was changed. But once it was a book, it becomes clear like, oh yeah, they adapted this thing, fairly quickly, and they managed to. There's an intricate enough structure in the novel that they managed to actually replicate in the film. You would never sit down and write a film this way, especially if you knew you were going to like shoot it all in 3.5 weeks on $80,000, because there's just too much stuff. There are too many people in it. There's too much, like when you sit down to write a movie, you think, okay, we're going to have a pretty clear through line. We're going to have an antagonist and a protagonist. And here you've got all these like little loops of like kind of characters like interacting with each other, and these kind of like personal motivations get entangled with the political motivations, and a lot of it just kind of ends up being people thrust against each other and like clashing, but not in kind of a clear-cut way,
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes the point of it takes more than just like it doesn't have the unrealistic one guy makes the change. It's got to be a bunch of people coming together to fight the evil to actually make any sort of change and make it stand. And some people are going to pay for it. Some people are going to get beaten down.
And at the end, the townspeople, they kind of like okay, so I guess this one Negro didn't rape a white girl, so I guess we can't, like, it's not like they changed their, like,
they don't,
they just know that, like, it's discredited at this point,
they just know, they just know they've lost another battle. That's all they know.
Yeah.
Because the politician character that Kramer initially sort of gets the support of is like, Kramer immediately goes to him and it's like, so, you're not for this integration stuff, are you? It's like, no, but I mean, it's the law now. They won. We lost that battle. It's like, well, we could fight it. Yeah. And when he realizes that, oh shit, we lost this one, then he immediately goes back to that mindset of, well, we lost, so we just have to shut up and keep our true feelings, under the collar kind of thing. And that's what the townspeople do. Like, he sees the townspeople walking away. He's like, well, there goes the support, and Kramer's too weak to lead us to anything, so I'm going to cut ties with him real quick and save my own ass, basically, is what he's doing.
Right.
It doesn't have that overly optimistic, they've come in and they've changed the town, and all of a sudden all the white people love all the black people and all that shit. There's still people, and they still have these feelings. Some of them are changing, but a lot of them aren't. And 90% of this town or more is fucking deeply racist. Like, they're a bunch of fucking assholes.
Yeah. And I mean, so just a word about sort of the lynching sequence. This is ripped from history in a lot of ways. You didn't see this kind of lynching in the 60s. This kind of ended mid to late 30s is kind of the latest point you see at this. Around kind of World War II. After World War II, it became lynchings were done more like kind of privately and under the cover of night and that sort of thing. Like you didn't see these kind of big crowds, but certainly, I mean, you can buy like postcards from the 1920s and 30s that were like lynching scene. They would lynch someone, and there would be picnics and like children hanging around. And I mean, I can give you some links to some of this stuff so you can actually see it. And I mean, it was just like, well, there's this guy, he committed this crime, and we're going to take care of that. And this is just the way we do business here. And sometimes that was done with the support of the kind of local law enforcement, and sometimes it was in kind of over the heads of local law enforcement, and sometimes law enforcement got in the way, and they ended up getting beaten for it and all that sort of thing. And, there's a great book that I will recommend, At the Hands of Persons Unknown, which is basically a history of lynching in the United States, and particularly in the American Southeast. Great book if you do want to kind of know the history of that. Seeing it done in this way in 1962, it's ahistorical, but it also works on the narrative level. I mean, it does the thing that it has to do, but it's kind of one of those only kind of pieces that feels like, that feels a little like not quite with its finger right on that button the way the rest of the film, because so much of the rest of the film is like just so specifically accurate to exactly what's happening, and that feels like kind of the big Hollywood scene as opposed to
I mean, Kramer gets the town and all riled up really quickly. Like, it seems like it wouldn't necessarily go quite that fast, but at the same time there's a bit of a when you look at the crowd that gathers around for the lynching, a lot of them are really old, and it feels like a lot of these people probably participated in lynchings at some point, like 30 years prior.
Sure.
Oh, we're going to get ourselves a good old lynching again. You got
that guy with the rope, and he's just like holding, and it's and Kramer's like, no, we need to. God, we got to talk about William Shatner here. I mean, Shatner standing there, Kramer in that really beautiful white suit with his clean cut hair and everything. It's fucking Richard Spencer, man. Like, he shows up in this town. I mean, this could be Charlottesville, right? He shows up there and is like, no, we don't need any violence for this. We're just political actors. We're just gonna take him. We're just gonna do the thing. You don't have control over. You have a tiger by the tail here, guy. And you are not nearly as much in charge of this as you think you are. And he gets told off by our buddy, by kind of the guy who ends up being the big hero.
Yeah, that's Sam Griffin, played by Leo Gordon.
Leo Gordon, yes. Who I looked at his Wikipedia page, and he also had a super long career.
Oh yeah,
playing tough guys in movies, and was himself also a writer kind of later on, and wrote a bunch of kind of Twilight Zone stuff, some Alfred Hitchcock, and et cetera, et cetera. And I also served 5 years. 5 years in San Quentin for armed robbery in post-war, which was just kind of one of those things. Like, apparently he educated himself by like reading every book in the library, and he's like this. I love how soft-spoken he is. I love how he's this like giant of a man, but he's so gregarious and he's so kind. And I love that he's kind of like he's portrayed as this a little bit of a brute of a man. Like, he likes to fuck. This is a man who likes to fuck.
This guy is almost, he's kind of Robert E. Howard. Kind of.
Yeah, I can see that. And you don't get the sense that he's like sort of actively anti-racist as much as he's sort of actively anti like this guy stirring up trouble. And he's somebody who was willing to do the right thing and leaned into that in a way that he didn't have the sort of crisis of conscience that our newspapermen did. But at the same time, this is more personal for him. That,
and he knows what a shitty little man Shatner actually is.
Exactly.
Like he because he's a salesman himself, and he has that scene with Shatner. He's like, you have a good technique and stuff, but you have flaws, and you're letting your flaws get in the way of your game. And I see right through you, your sales pitch. And then they have that scene with the gun, and Shatner gets the gun, and so he's like, well, shoot me. And if you're gonna shoot me, and I don't think you'll do it because you're a coward. And turns out Shatner is a coward.
Yep.
But at the same time, he's smart enough to have taken the bullets out of the gun beforehand.
Yeah. Little insurance policy there, Oh, I knew you weren't going to shoot me. That's why I took the bullets out of the gun first.
But it's beautiful. Him taking the bullets out of the gun gives him the freedom to go through his entire thought process about Shatner and about what Shatner did with his wife. And why his wife has all of a sudden run out on him because she was ashamed of herself for falling for this racist piece of shit.
Yep.
And he gets to say everything that's on his mind to Shatner, and he just breaks Shatner down and just tears him into nothing. Like, he's like, you're nothing. You're a little man. You kind of get the feeling that, Shatner could probably go on, but it feels like he's definitely had his confidence curb stomped at this point.
Oh,
you know,
and that's exactly what happens with these guys once they're challenged. I mean, these guys are bullies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're bullies who want to like get the mob to do their dirty work for them.
Yeah.
You know, they're bullies with fucking words instead of like with fists, which is very common with bullies. And I mean, it does take strength to stand up to that. It does take, it takes tactics and strategy, and there are all kinds of problems with that. And I don't want to in any way diminish it, but these people are terrified of the world around them, and that's why they push into this. And it's just such a great fucking movie. It's so like on point.
It's surprisingly great. I think most people going into it will kind of think, okay, Roger Corman, it might be okay. It might be Black Klansman level, like the 60s Black Klansman level kind of thing. You kind of expect that. But this balances, like there's exploitation in it, but man, it balances it with the sensitivity and the unflinching look at the actual issues.
Yep.
That Black Klansman movie just couldn't hope to even fucking touch.
No. And I mean, we liked Black Klansman like overall. And again, we're talking about the one from the 60s, not the one from again, something I do, I mean, I think I highlighted this already, but just want to mention this. We're used to seeing these kind of films made, a few years later, like 5-10 years later, something that's like, oh, and look at how terrible pre-civil rights era was. So look at how, this isn't that. This was made at the time, and it makes a big difference. So like Black Klansman was made in, I think, 66. That's like after the Civil Rights Act passed, and when like, sort of the tide had turned. This was right at the center of it, and that's so fascinating and courageous to me. Like even going in and shooting this, they couldn't like they couldn't actually, tell the townspeople what the movie was really about. Or else they were,
they shot in a couple different towns.
Yeah,
in one of the towns they got run over.
The final sequence, like the playground sequence, it's actually shot on 3 different playgrounds because they had to leave the first town once the townspeople kind of realized, and they moved to a different town, and then they got kicked out of that town as well. So they got 3 playgrounds to finally like get it shot. And apparently, if you look at it in detail, you can kind of tell it's 3 different locations.
But it's 3 different swings, and
but you're mostly just not kind of like following in that much detail.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, they actually they came back to shoot in secret, and the sheriff got wind, and they actually finished the shot and got out of there before the sheriff showed up and caught them because they didn't want to film in there. But it is an amazing film. Like it's. Seriously good. Like it's Oscar worthy good, actually.
No, definitely. I mean, honestly, it's better than Oscar worthy, frankly. I mean, because the Oscars are so often this kind of neutered kind of nonsense. But I guess like they do make good decisions. I mean, The Apartment, obviously.
I say Oscar worthy in the idea that like the actual ideals of the Oscars of like awards to the greatest movies.
This could very easily be one of the best films of the year it was made. Like there's no question that like if we went and like looked at films of 1962, this would belong on like a top 10 list for sure. Yeah. And we haven't really. I mean, I kind of brushed on Shatner. Shatner is phenomenal in this.
He is. He's really good.
It's worth realizing that, like at this point, Shatner was basically like a Broadway actor who was like doing a little bit of TV kind of here and there. This was a very early performance for him, and he is mesmerizing in this film. And it kind of, I don't want to say unrecognizable, but if you're expecting sort of like the traditional like Shatnerian performance, this isn't that at all. I mean, physically he looks like Captain Kirk at this point because he's got like his first hairpiece firmly set in at this point because he was losing his hair in his 20s. Right. And he had like a series of like hair pieces during his Broadway and TV acting in the 50s. But here he's got Captain Kirk hairpiece in, which served him well for like a decade or more. And and he is really good here. Like he does have scenes where he goes big, but it never feels inappropriate. It feels well reined in and well done. Even though I think Corman at one point in interviews later on said that Shatner would kind of like hurt the film with his performance. I totally disagree on that. No, he's amazing. I think there were a couple of points where he's a little bit showy, a little bit theatrical.
Right, yeah.
But that's mostly in the in the kind of big crowd scene where he like gives the speech and where he's like,
But he's got to sell the monorail.
But he's selling the monorail exactly. he's doing the bit. He's the music man coming in and selling this particular version of racism. But I do love. I mean, God, that scene is so well written because it's like and then the communists who are also Jews,
right?
And the way he elongates who is a Jew. And
you almost see the brackets form.
Yeah, you can see the whole it's like God. I watched it the first time and went holy fuck! You could play this right next. Again, you could put a Richard Spencer speech or a David Duke speech, and you could put sandwiches right there, and just it's flawless in terms of its structure and the way it does it. I mean, it's so. I don't want this film to be better known because it would you would start to see online chuds with Adam Kramer as their profile and shit.
Oh, Jesus, I'm sure it's out there too, somewhere, but.
Yeah, I mean, I don't run across it, so it's not prominent enough to be an in joke for them yet. But who knows?
Well, if they're going to
find this podcast episode, and then
yeah, if they watch the whole movie through, they just proclaim him a cuck at the end, though.
Yeah. Oh, what, he doesn't want to do violence? Come on, man. What are you talking
come
about?
on, what the fuck?
Yeah.
But I mean, that is true of the Richard Spencers and all those people, because you look at the fucking asshole who did the hit and run at Charlottesville. Everyone turned their back on him.
I mean, God, they completely disavowed him immediately because, so he did the quiet part loud. He actually killed people instead of no.
Yep.
No, agreed.
Yeah, no, this movie is fucking great. It really does do everything, and it's still pertinent today. It has not aged.
I mean, it's God, and there's so subplots we haven't even mentioned, the kind of the false rape thing, and again, that's something that so many of these lynching stories were basically there's some spurious story of a black man came in and raped a white woman, and this protection of white femininity becomes a justification for murdering the hulking black brute, and then you do that so that you keep the other ones in line, and all this super complicated stuff. And if you look at sort of the history of these lynchings, in some cases, yeah, the rape was probably real, and but that doesn't mean you just get to as a town to go burn this person alive or whatever,
yeah,
we have laws for a reason. But then in other cases they get railroaded or whatever, and it's just this, but it's so note perfect for the real thing. And I mean, I want to take To Kill a Mockingbird, which is not a bad film, not a bad book, not a bad film, but this gets at the core of that so much better than
the
kind of speechifying,
Yeah, Charles Beaumont's character here, Mr. Patton, is he supposed to be Jewish in this film? I think.
I mean, Beaumont himself isn't, as far as I know the reading. I mean, I don't think he's supposed to be Jewish. Although our buddy Leo Gordon there, he orders a Zenith, which is I mean, my wife saw that and she's like, "Why is he ordering that? Doesn't make any sense." Because my wife is Jewish, and she was she's like, "Oh, the Jew food in a movie," I love that he orders it and then suddenly it's "All right, scrambled eggs and coffee," and it's all right.
Although he could be much more like Robert E. Howard than I even imagined, because Robert E. Howard, he was, this Texas boy, and he had the ingrained sort of Texas racism in him, but he was a guy who went across the border and indulged in, Mexican culture and stuff like that too. So, and picked up a lot of that stuff. So it could be kind of the same idea here. I've been around some Jews before, and I like those people. Kind of.
I mean, certainly. So, I mean, there are pockets of Jewish people in the Deep South around this time. And they just sort of had communities where they kind of stuck together so that they weren't beholden to kind of deal with the virulently anti-Semitic culture around them. And certainly somebody kind of working as a traveling salesman for a pen company, probably had a Jewish boss. Let's just leave it at that. In the Deep South, it would not have been uncommon at this point, So.
I forgot what I was going to say about Mr. Patton. I don't know.
I love that character as well, because he gets what's going on, and again, so many small moments of quiet heroism in this, and so much of, there are people that I interact with who I am in awe of their courage in combating this on the ground, and as it's manifesting today. but so much of it is just a little moment of just not letting them get to you, and so much of it is like understanding that you're gonna get death threats, and what else are you gonna do except, what are you gonna do, cower from it, or just kind of brazen on, and ultimately all you can do is just kind of keep moving on. It's kind of amazing, and you see that in these characters. You see that in like Beaumont's character, where he could have given this kid up, or he could have said like, we're gonna take you to the sheriff's office, and he's literally like, he almost goes like straight up Western, we're gonna get you to the next town, kid. Like it was this very kind of are we gonna do 310 to Yuma now? Is this the like, is this what the structure of this? We got to get him on the train, but yeah, no, and he kind of has that hero moment, but also it ends up not being really about him. It ends up being Joey Green kind of gets his place in the sun, and he gets his place in the movie, and gets to have his own integrity and his own agency there. And I do really love that. I mean, even films that are broadly sympathetic to, kind of anti-racist messages and kind of African-American actors and such, typically don't, this is not like he's not the lead in the film, he might be in another film. It's still made in 1962 by like overwhelmingly white, people. Yeah. But he does get his moment, and I think that it's a really well earned one, and it's a really well observed, and really, I love that we get to see that in this film, and that he isn't just a victim of this kind of larger thing.
No, he's one of the group of people who stand up against this shit, and he's one of the group of people from his own community that actually stands up, instead of, well, maybe we shouldn't go to the white school, or maybe we should just quiet down and let things be the way they are. It's like the white folks ain't bothering us as much anymore. We ain't slaves anymore. We should just maybe shut up and duck our heads or whatever, right? Well, and he's like, no, fuck that.
Imagine if you were in this town, and you were, it's like, well, I can go to the white school, or I can kind of keep going where I'm going, and try to get out of this town in a couple of years when I graduate, or try to kind of just be safe, don't confront this if you don't have to, for some perception of like maybe not the greatest amount of gain. Like, is this worth your life? Again, that becomes such a, you can't blame people for feeling that way, like, I don't need this in my life, but at the same time, it never changes unless somebody makes that decision.
He goes to Los Angeles, gets a white girlfriend, grows a chin beard, and somehow he gets the Michael Jackson disease, where his skin goes a little too pale, and and then we got the sequel, Black Klansman.
Black Klansman, yeah, no, that's the thing, yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah, so I don't know if we have anything else to say about this.
We've talked about this film almost as long as the film lasts. So,
yeah, it's got a great running time too.
84 minutes is like perfect for this too, because it definitely doesn't wear its welcome. You can imagine this being an hour 45. Like you could build more like character depth into this, but it gets in, it gets out. It's super efficient. A lot happens in this film in 84 minutes, and it's not a second is wasted. It's compelling. It never feels like it's rushing, but it never feels like it's dawdling either,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, it's well paced. So this is one of the few 1960s low budget exploitation movies that actually lost money. It took Roger Corman and his brother like a long time to even get this film made, because I guess a couple studios passed on it or whatever, so they actually had to fund a lot of it out of their own pockets. They actually re-released it several times under the different titles to try to turn a profit, and they did not get a profit. Actually, they didn't get back into the black until there was a Charles Beaumont documentary made, The Twilight Zone's Magic Man. The money they paid Corman to use to have him on it and use some footage and stuff, $6,000 apparently eventually paid off the budget on this. so if, it only took like 40-50 years for this movie to actually
finally made its money back. But
and budget for this was $80,000, although I've also seen the source $100,000, which would be like $20,000 for promotional probably kind of thing. That makes sense. DVD info for this. Your best bet is the Disney Buena Vista DVD from 2007. There is a Blu-ray in France, and if you can find that, apparently it's French subtitles, so it's probably still the English language version if you can get a hold of that. But that's pretty much it. And you said you bought the DVD?
Yeah, I bought the DVD. It was, I think, like $12 on Amazon or something, and it was purely based on, like, I looked on YouTube and I couldn't really find what I thought was a really good looking print, and so I just bought it. So.
Right. Did you notice if it was streaming anywhere?
I did not. I mean, it wasn't streaming on Amazon Prime that I saw.
There's a couple copies on YouTube.
I found a couple copies. One with I think Portuguese subtitles or something.
Something like that. Yeah.
Everything just kind of looked dark enough, and I had enough lead time, and I was I'm gonna want to own this anyway, so I just bought it. But.
There's one on the what is it, the Internet Archive or wherever the fuck it is.
That makes sense.
And it's not bad quality. It's watchable. It's about as good as any of those 50 movie pack DVDs you can buy out there. Kind of if you're familiar with that, that's kind of what you get with it. But watch the YouTube version with the subtitles. It's still English language, so you just have to get past the subtitles on it or whatever. But it's pretty good. I would recommend you buy it though, because it's a great movie. So Daniel, you have recently just appeared on a podcast, so talk about that, and then also tell people where they can find you on the interweb.
Sure. Well, I just recently appeared on the Psychosemantic Podcast, or Psychosemantic Cast, talking about whatever he's calling that. I don't think even he knows. Darren Wilson knows.
He really doesn't.
That, yeah. But we talked about the 1998 film Pleasantville, which was a film that meant a lot to me when I saw it when I was 18, and which I had a lot more problems with upon revisiting, to record that podcast. But still a film that was really worth talking about, that covers some of the same ground we're covering tonight. Yeah. Honestly, I feel like I've been watching a bunch of these films lately. It'll be nice to move away from it slightly in upcoming episodes. But no, that was a fun podcast recording, and that was a fun. I re-listened to that. That's pretty good. So go check that out. That'll be a note in the show notes, I think. Yeah. So you can check that out. And I think I'm going to be doing that podcast again at some point. Sweet, because it was fun. So
I figured you'd get the bug to jump on that one again.
I told him I'd do it every couple months. It's cool. He only does one every 2 weeks, so it's pretty easy to just kind of watch a movie and hop on that one, I think. So that's what.
Yeah, I figured you'd get something out of that. He invited me on it as well, but. I'm a little less interested in talking about politics when it comes to talking about movies than you are. So sure. I'm kind of wondering if I'd be a good fit for that podcast. But and where else can people find you? Did you say
you can find me? No, I didn't. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Daniel E. Harper. I follow Nazis and neo-Nazis and people who worship serial killers, and they are really disgusting, awful human beings, and they do come after me occasionally, as happened this evening. So, that's the way it works. I was just on another podcast. I just did a live stream called Queer Transmission, where they had discovered my other major podcast, I Don't Speak German, where I talk about these things with our buddy Jack Graham. The person who runs that podcast had discovered my other podcast, or that live stream discovered I Don't Speak German, and invited me to kind of come on and kind of talk about stuff and then everybody else who was supposed to be on that canceled, so I ended up just kind of talking for an hour and 15 minutes, and fucking Nazis invaded that stream. So great job. It was almost instantaneously too. So, congratulations.
Sad little people.
Yay, YouTube. But you can also check that out, Queer Transmission on YouTube, which sweet. I literally finished recording about 30 minutes before we started recording this, so it's up. And that's where you can find me. Lots of various things that I do talking into a microphone for no money. You can also pay me if you'd like to. I do have a Patreon.
And you can find us at tmbdos.podbean.com, where you can find our Apple Podcast links, our YouTube and Facebook links. Join the Facebook group. That's the best way to find out what's coming up on the podcast. But I'm going to tell you right now, next episode is going to be the Jay Deering on our Facebook group requested the House that Jack Built, the recent Lars von Trier movie.
Okay.
So we're going definitely into left field.
We're doing that one. Okay. Nice. Let's do something really lighthearted. Lars von Trier. Yeah.
So this should be an interesting one.
Let's watch 4 hours of emotional torture porn for next week. How does that sound?
Yeah. Why not?
Sure. I'm down.
But until
we appreciate it, Jay. It's not meant to be a negative there. It's just great. We just finished talking about the Klan. Now, Lars von Trier. Nice change of pace.
So, thank you, Daniel, and thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll be back when we're back. Goodbye.
Cheers.
You have been listening to They Must Be Destroyed on Sight. For other episodes, our links to Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and our Facebook group, as well as links to podcasts and websites of similar interest, please visit us at tmbdos.podbean.com. Thank you. Drive through.